Since Battlefield 2042 has come out, there's been a lot of conversation around what game modes are missing, what we want to see, and hopefully what's going to get added in the form of new modes for us to play. Going off the back of a lot of conversations I've had over the past couple of weeks with various people in the Battlefield community, I think there's one game mode that is sorely missed in 2042, and one which would add a lot more grounding to the world of 2042 and might help to make the game a bit more immersive. The mode I'm actually referring to is Operations/Grand Operations. And interestingly, it's not really a mode that's from any of my favourite Battlefield games either. If we look back at both Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5, Operations and Grand Operations respectively were some of the favourite modes played by the majority of the player base. It's definitely up for debate which mode was better in which game. Personally, I would say that Operations in Battlefield 1 was slightly better, and I feel like the flow between maps and modes in Operations made a lot more sense, but obviously because that was grounded in World War I and the attack-defend mentality of that historical conflict. Again, this made it feel a lot more grounded in the world that DICE were trying to create in Battlefield 1, and really added to the immersive aspect that everyone felt when they played BF1 as well. In comparison, I think DICE went with a lot more of a creative license in Battlefield 5 and Grand Operations. I mean, that can be seen across all of Battlefield 5 if I'm honest. But it also led to some interesting changes and some different ways to approach the Operations game mode. Just look at the example of attacking Twisted Steel. When playing as the German forces, you would end up paratrooping into the map rather than just coming in on foot. A really unique concept which added a bit more variety to the standard breakthrough push and season objective that we'd seen quite a lot up to that point. If I'm honest, Battlefield 5 wasn't quite as immersive as Battlefield 1, so Grand Operations didn't really add too much in that respect. But it did add a bit of longer form gameplay which Battlefield 5 would probably have been missing. But let's talk about Operations in the context of 2042. We know that EA are doubling down on the Battlefield franchise, having brought in the likes of Marcus Leto and Vince Zampella to try and steer the franchise in a new direction, especially because they're looking to springboard off the back of 2042 and also to keep creating games in this universe. The only drawback to that is that at this point, I wouldn't say there's really a universe to draw on. We're obviously receiving new details every time a new season comes out, and they are trying to build on the 2042 universe, but let's be honest, unless you're really invested in 2042, it's highly unlikely you're going to be going onto the DICE EA website to have a read of the context of the 2042 scenarios that each season is building up. With that in mind, I really think that an Operation style mode in 2042 would help to ground us as players into the world. And ultimately, this is all fictional. They could literally take it wherever they want. But by using the Operations game mode specifically, it will add more of a narrative to 2042 in the universe that we're in, and at least help us as players understand exactly what is making this universe tick. I think a lot of us as players at the moment don't really care about 2042 in terms of that kind of context, and rather we just play the game because it's the newest Battlefield game. Whereas we can look back at successful games of the past, like the Bad Company series, or even Battlefield 3 and 4 to an extent, where their traditional campaigns also helped us to get an understanding of the conflicts that were occurring in the games. Does this mean that we need a new campaign? Potentially, but if DICE don't want to go down that route again, then Operations would be a really good segue into helping us become more invested. And like I said, by doing this they would have the ultimate amount of creative freedom. This is a fictitious conflict which doesn't exist, and they could easily map it out in a way that would help to build the narrative, potentially leading on to the next game in the franchise. Now, do I think we will see Operations in 2042? By the sounds of it, I think it's probably quite unlikely, and I'm not too sure how much of the player base would really be that bothered now. I think it's more people like myself who previously have been really invested in the kind of narrative and the story-driven elements of a Battlefield game, but ultimately I know a significant amount of the player base really aren't interested in that either. They just want to get in there and play the multiplayer game. Let me know down in the comments if you would like to see Operations in 2042, or if you think it would make an interesting change in the game at all. Alternatively, let me know what other game modes you'd like to see. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure, thank you again for your time, and I'll catch you all in the next one.